This is a subject that's a bit out of the norm for this channel, but today is the Iowa Caucus, which officially launches the 2016 presidential election, and it brought up a subject that I've been wanting to talk about for a while now. I actually tried to do a car thoughts video about it, but the sound was terrible. I'll be honest, I don't know the answer. I don't know what the fix is. For my non-American friends out there who probably understand this better than most Americans, 2016 is a presidential year, and the beginning of the presidential election begins with the primaries, where the different parties select their candidates that are going to go head-to-head, mano a mano, in the general election. And that is not a sexist statement. The word mano in Spanish means hand, so it means hand-to-hand, like hand-to-hand combat, to the death. Just kidding, it's not to the death. Not anymore. By the way, just a quick aside, the guy who shot Alexander Hamilton was Aaron Burr. He was the sitting vice president at the time. The vice president! I mean, could you imagine today the sitting vice president shooting a guy? Like, could you imagine Dick Cheney just shooting a guy in the face? Oh, right, that totally happened. Back to my point though, I've been thinking about this for a while, about how just kind of weird this election is, and I thought I would share with you 3 reasons why this is one of the most bizarre elections in American history. Number 1, old people. Believe it or not, all the frontrunners in this election, if elected, would be the oldest president in U.S. history. Right now, the mantle of oldest president goes to Ronald Reagan, who was elected at 69. Am I the only one who was surprised he was that young? Hillary Clinton would tie Reagan. She's 68 now, but would be 69 when she got elected. Donald Trump is 69 right now. He'd be 70 when he got elected. And Bernie Sanders is 74 right now. So when he takes office, he'd be like 100. I don't know if this is just a strange coincidence or if this is just like the last hurrah for a bunch of people who think this is the last time they'll ever get a chance to be president, or I don't know if this is saying something about the general health care of people, that we're living longer and that kind of thing. Or maybe it doesn't mean anything, but it's kind of crazy. Number 2, the polls don't mean shit. This isn't a brand new thing. This actually became apparent in the 2012 election, but because of modern technology, old polling methods don't really mean anything anymore. The reason is that most polling is done over the phone, and since the rise of cell phones, the only people who use landlines generally are older people. Not to mention, since we all have caller ID, most of us don't answer the phone if we don't know who's calling. Now, one could argue that older people do vote more than young people do, which is why midterm and local elections are usually a little bit more accurate in the polling. But big national presidential elections that actually turn out the younger vote, it's chaos. Hence, the pundits were totally shaking their heads in 2012 when all the polls showed that Romney was dead even, or maybe even a little bit ahead of Obama, and then when all the results came in, it was pretty much a landslide. This year could prove to be even further off the mark. That's why these first few primaries are going to be really interesting. And reason number 3, Facebook, or social media in general, but Facebook's the most evil, so I'll pick on them. This is the first presidential election without an incumbent since the rise of social media. And social media, especially Facebook, has led to a rise in polarization that has not been seen in modern history. Let me explain. Once upon a time, there were only 3 television networks, and every city had, usually only 1 or 2 major newspapers. Now, the argument could be made that having all the information in the hands of a few different corporations is a bad thing, and I wouldn't argue that. But at least back then, we were all on the same playing field. We may not have agreed on the politics, but we did agree on the facts. The news was actually considered to be a service to the community. In fact, the only reason the broadcasters did the news was because they were legally bound to. See, in the early days of TV, the airwaves were actually owned by the U.S. government, and they leased out certain frequencies to the broadcasters for free. The only stipulation was that they had to set aside time every day to provide news for the community. They didn't have to worry about ratings. The news wasn't there to make money. They actually lost money doing the news. That was how they paid for their bandwidth. Then along came cable news. Suddenly, the news wasn't just a service anymore. It became the commodity. And it wasn't just a couple of hours a day, it was 24 hours a day of news to fill and multiple channels to compete against for ratings. The more sensational they were, the more people watched. News became entertainment. Eventually, people of different political persuasions began to gravitate toward different channels, and the media became fractured. People started going to channels that said what they wanted to hear. And they watched it all day long. And just when we thought we couldn't be more politically indoctrinated and brainwashed, along comes Facebook. Look, we're all guilty of it. Some guy says some ignorant stuff that you can't stand on your Facebook page, and you decide, you know what, I don't need this in my life, and you just delete them. It happened to me recently. An old high school acquaintance unfriended me with a warning saying that my dad would never agree with my political stance. Wow, a father and son with different political opinions? That's gotta be the first time that's ever happened. But it's understandable, you know, we spend a lot of time on Facebook. Facebook kind of becomes our home, and some guy comes in and says things that we think are abhorrent in our own home. Of course we're gonna kick him out of our home. But this is a problem. When we unfriend people who don't agree with us politically, we basically shut ourselves off from political opinions outside of our own. We create an echo chamber of other people who think the same way we do, and it just reinforces our beliefs that we already have. It constantly reinforces to us that what we think is right. This pushes people further and further to the extremes of political opinion and amps up the emotion along the way. So on the right you have Donald Trump, and on the left you have Bernie Sanders, and regardless of how you feel about either one of them, they are definitely the more extreme on either side of the political spectrum. And they're the ones getting all the momentum right now. Their politics couldn't be any more different, but they seem to be kind of riding the same wave. The author John Meacham recently said that it's really common in presidential elections that people, gravitate toward the more extreme candidates in the beginning, but eventually they come back into the center. But this year is different because this year there really isn't a center. Because of this fractured landscape of media, we don't even agree on the same facts anymore. Not only are we not on the same playing field, we're not even playing the same sport. Which is why the Iowa Caucus today is going to be very, very interesting. Now, whoever wins this caucus is not a guarantee that they're going to be the presidential nominee. It is just one state, and it's not always right in picking the eventual winner. But it is the official beginning of the 2016 presidential election, which is shaping up to be one of the weirdest presidential elections in a long, long time. So I'm going to court certain YouTube death and ask you guys to talk politics in the comments. What am I thinking? Actually, it's not about the politics. I just want to hear what you think about the fractured media that we live with and how social media has changed the way that we see and consume political information. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Discuss on social media. Thanks for watching. This is definitely not a typical subject for me to tackle in these videos. I definitely usually go more toward the big sciencey stuff, but today, being, the beginning of something that's very politically and culturally relevant, at least where I live, thought it'd be worth talking about, so that's what I'm doing here. If you like it, thumbs up. If you like it more, subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time. I got some cool stuff coming your way. I'm really excited about it. Hope you are too. Hope you're having a great year. February's just started. Have a good February, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.